I always had capacities to see and feel and hear things when I was younger that most people didn't. I could see energy fields and what we call auras, and had lots of awarenesses. We're wired to sense potential, but we're taught to perceive limitation. In that moment that I said, I give up, it happened. There was this incredible experience of deepening and then an explosion of awareness. And then when I had this experience, everything just popped out and came to life. And it was just everything was alive. The road was alive, the tree was alive, the ocean was alive, and it was all one living being.
Welcome to Enlighten Me. I'm Katie, and this is my brother Adrian. And our guest today is Rebecca Dawson. We're so excited to talk to you, Rebecca. And just tell us all about your spiritual journey from wherever you would like to start.
Oh, spiritual journey. Well, it's been a long one. So my name is Rebecca Dawson. As you can tell by my accent, I'm originally Australian, but I live in the US more recently. And I'm a channeler and an author, and I've been doing this for about 30 years. I always had capacities to see and feel and hear things when I was younger that most people didn't. I could see energy fields and what we call auras, and had lots of awarenesses and past life memories, all that kind of thing when I was quite young. I grew up in a Catholic home. And there was a lot of exploration that sort of pushed the boundaries a little bit, but I was very lucky. My family were very supportive and recognized that I was a little bit different to most children growing up. And I started my first formal meditation classes at around the age of 9. And I was very interested in anything metaphysical. And I can tell you that it was a very limited section in the school library when I was young. But that's where I used to spend my lunchtimes, either playing chess or looking at I think the section they had was unexplained phenomena or something like that. And all I could really find was books on UFOs or spontaneous combustion or, mysteries. And it just intrigued me because anything paranormal seemed more normal to me than anything else that was really going on around me. So
That's very interesting. I think we were also kind of fascinated with those same type of things, but not for the same reason, because you said those almost seem more normal to you. I think part of my fascination was they seemed so abnormal. So that's very interesting that seemed more
yeah,
normal.
well, life to me just seemed a little flat. It seemed a little cardboard cutout. And I always could sense the magic in things and sense that there was more in things. But it didn't really present itself, and I couldn't really understand that. So there was some kind of awareness from a young age that I had a very limited perception of what was really happening in our world and what was really present. So yeah, I guess I came to an awareness that if I could deepen my own capacity to see and sense more, then the world would present itself to me, because as it was, didn't really match how I felt about it. And one of the most interesting things for me, I would say frustrating, as a child, was that nobody else seemed to be asking those questions or seemed to be really interested or seemed to notice the depth of life. I was very telepathic when I was young, so I could pick up other people's thoughts, and it used to drive people nuts, actually, because I used to finish people's sentences for them and finish the conversation before it started. And having, an awareness of deceased relatives that were around and seeing different energies went out in nature, and, to go from that kind of depth of perception, I'll call it a depth of perception, to, let's try and get all ticks on our next assignment at school. It just didn't really make a lot of sense.
That's so interesting. I've heard other people talk about tuning into like these things that you're talking about at an early age. And it seems like a lot of those people will suppress that because, well, they want to fit in.
Right.
But you mentioned you were finishing other people's sentences, so I'm just very curious how that came
Well, I
off.
think I was just seen as quite annoying, probably. Maybe a bit of a know-it-all. So I think after some years, that's a good point. I think my confidence dipped a bit because I learned that it wasn't really appropriate to have the answers to things, or to steal people's thunder, or however it was perceived. So for sure, once I was really into the education system, my focus just became doing well there. And I still had my secret off to the side explorations, but I learned by the time I was an early teenager that is not something that you should share with others. So it was a very kind of secreted part of myself that I only really got to discover when I
So
left
when
school.
you came to that point of I should maybe not be so vocal about this, did it did you feel repressed? Did you feel, because now you have these talents and now you feel like you can't really share
Well, I
those
think what I
talents?
realized was that I couldn't explore it with anybody else, and it was something that I really had to do on my
Mm.
own. I mean, I could go to like a meditation group or, a spiritual center, but at that time, you're a teenager, and every one of those kinds of places, well, at least back in the 80s or early 90s, were like, much older people who looked super spiritual, dressed in white, and like spiritualist churches and those sorts of places back then. And I couldn't really relate to that either. It all seemed very, very serious. And it had an aura of, you have to earn your way to this. I didn't really experience those kinds of environments as welcoming, if that makes sense. And the general reception I experienced was, you're a bit too young, and that's nice that you're interested, but
Mm.
which is
Wow.
which is fine. But I think that all of the experiences that I had at that age really encouraged me to go my own way and to do what I was doing more quietly. Um, yeah, and discover my own flavor and my own version of seeing life. I say my own. Well, nothing belongs to me personally, but I do believe that there is merit in discovering that deepening within yourself for yourself, and not having a teacher or a framework of reference or knowledge to inform you. And I'm so glad that that was my way. At the time, I found it challenging, and I generally felt a sense of rejection from the spiritual communities that I tried to be involved with. And of course, what I realize now is that I trust what emerges from here more than anything that I hear out there. And it's not that anything out there can't be trusted, it's that I always check within, and how is this emerging for me? And if I wasn't able to do that, I don't think I would be the channeler that I am today, where I can just completely let go and enable new things to emerge. I would always have to check. Is anyone else saying that? Is it true? Do we have evidence? And that's not how we operate. So I'm thankful for that experience.
Right. So that was actually a really fueled your path and your awakening, that you had
Yeah.
you had to rely on yourself. Yeah, I think most of us, like, I don't have those abilities, and so um, yeah, everything in my world, almost everything is external. I'm on my spiritual path, I would like to believe, but that's really nice to hear that you you really flourished because you had to look within, and you had to see what was going on, and that really allowed you to
Had to.
grow.
Yeah. And it was just such a burning curiosity. And I would say, just on this note, Adrienne, we all have this capacity. We all do. I am a deep, deep believer and knower of that. But it's this incessant, let me check externally to see if what I'm doing is right, that can often distract us from what we know is true. So yeah, I mean, with the work that we do with the masters, that's the group consciousness I bring through. We're always encouraging people to develop their own sense of the world, and because that's when you begin to sense reality as it really can be. We're wired to sense potential, but we're taught to perceive limitation.
True. How do you suggest we go about that? I know you were meditating from what I heard before and trying, and then didn't you just give
I
up one
didn't.
day and then that's when it
That's
happened?
right. Well, I mean, I'd always been meditating and expanding things. Really, how much depth of perception can I have? How much can I feel? How much can I tune in? And so I'd had a big experience of that, and channeling had started spontaneous for me quite young, around 17 or 18. But it wasn't really enough. And I know that sounds funny to people because people are like, oh, I've often had people say, I'd love to learn how to channel. That would be amazing. But I'd already moved into channeling, which was wonderful because I was learning so much from that experience. But it wasn't enough for me because the great desire I had within me was to know, what is this? What is this? And really the question was, I guess in more of a theosophical sense or theological sense, was what is God, or what is life, or what am I, which is ultimately all the same question. But I wanted to know it, and I knew that I couldn't know it from my mind. I wanted to know it from the core of my being. And so I spent quite a lot of time. I decided I was living in Indonesia and I didn't have too much to do at that time. Life presented itself with an opportunity for me to be there for a while without too much responsibility. So I decided to use that time to just sit in meditation every day so that I could get to that awareness. And I tried to go to a couple of ashrams up that way, actually, to see if I could go in there and just meditate for a while. And I couldn't get in anyway. No one seemed to want me to join them, which was super interesting. But again, I had to do it for myself. So I would sit on the balcony day after day and I would meditate and get more deep and deeper and deeper. And I would feel like I was right on the edge. I'm right on the edge. And I don't know if you've experienced this before in having an understanding. You know how sometimes you're trying to remember something and it's right on the tip of your tongue and you feel that, oh, it's just there. So I had that, oh, it's just there experience a number of times. And then one day I'd been there for a lot of hours and it was hot and the sun was coming around and I was on the balcony and overlooking the water. And then I thought, this is ridiculous. This is not working. I am so frustrated and I'm hot and I'm tired and I swore, as you do. And I said, this, I give up. And in that moment that I said, I give up, it happened. And there was this incredible experience of deepening and then an explosion of awareness. And that's what I call the Oneness Experience that I had. And it actually lasted for 4 days. And for 4 days, I was everything and everything was me. And it was an extraordinary experience. And I'm so grateful for it because it shifted my view on everything in life. Yeah, very blessed. I actually feel like if I had have just left the planet at that time, I would be happy. I mean, I was still happy because I had that experience, but for me, that was like the completion experience. And then now what do we do? Interesting. So that's my near-death experience.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of as close as you come.
Which is really a life experience. It's an explosion of life.
Yeah. Beautiful. So if you were trying to help someone else tap into that, just 1% of that, would it be to try and then release, or try and then let go, or just surrender, or what? how would you, could you provide like guidance for someone else to experience a little bit
I
of
actually
that?
just ran a retreat in Hawaii that was all about that. But we went through an experience of 4 days where we accompanied people into that space, and it's so wonderful because once you see it, you can't unsee it. It is an experience of really letting go. But I would say the biggest thing that we let go of is, and this is the paradox, is the desire for it and your identity. And this is the great crisis that many people are going through at this time, which actually brings people to investigating spirituality or wanting to understand more, like you guys. It's oftentimes, it's either an intense curiosity that arises out of this is not enough, or it's a sense of crisis of identity. And usually when we deepen our awareness and we become more conscious, there's always a death that occurs. And so, talking about near-death experiences, we go through experiences of death all the time, the more awakened we become, because we let go of who we think we are. We let go of attachments. We let go of what we think we need to survive. We let go of what we think we want. We let go of some of our memories, and a lot of that people experience through, trauma, what they call trauma release. And it's really being willing to not know who you are. And that's the greatest challenge to people, because people often believe that once you really become more expanded and conscious and, move into a state of illumination, that you know everything. But actually what happens is the opposite, is you give up the desire to know anything. And you just relax into the all-knowing experience of life. And it's quite a different experience, but it's very difficult for the mind to ascertain, because the mind wants to possess things. It wants to gain knowledge. It wants to gain accumulation. It wants to gain wisdom. And being awakened is really the opposite of that. You realize that none of that really has any value. So oftentimes it's people who come to their wits' end and give up that drop into that state. It's quite amazing. I believe Eckhart Tolle actually went through that experience where he was at his wits' end and he gave up and dropped into that state. He was willing to give up his identity. Sure.
The word surrender is often brought up in other near-death experiences. Like Carlos had said he was drowning and he just surrendered, and then he was saved immediately. So like that word is often brought up. It's interesting so many times.
It is interesting. I guess, like you were saying, it seems that most of us in the physical world, it's the opposite. It's just try, push,
Right.
push. And it's, yeah. So yeah, I'm trying to, I'm taking notes here for myself, because I was actually planning a trip to Bali. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to sit on the balcony. I'm going to get really hot. I'm going to first, like a sailor, and then give up and
Chris like an Aussie. Well, what's so interesting is that in general, what I've discovered in my experience is that everything tends to be the opposite of what we think it is. And for sure, that was my experience. I thought, well, if I tried really hard and pushed really hard and was really diligent, that it would land. And the opposite was true. And it's the same with so many things. It's really just a relaxing into what already is. And surrender is not something we can do with the mind, because it's a little bit like that phrase, love yourself. I find surrender and love yourself kind of in the same category for me personally, which is, that's great. I get it, but what does that actually really mean? And so what I would point people towards is, what will that actually feel like? Because this is not something that the mind can do. If we start to navigate into this more with what will it feel like, and what do I sense it as, that's a far more accurate compass and can really guide us into something far more easily than the mind can, because the mind is designed to take us away and out here into reality, and sense is designed to bring us back into here. And everything that we're looking for is actually within, because our bodies are portals for consciousness. So the mind, of course, wants to take us out on a journey away from that to develop identity and sense, what does that feel like for me? What is the feeling of surrender? You feel it here in your body. And so everything that we're feeling is bringing us back to our expanded consciousness within. But everything we think is taking us out, away from it. It's kind of fascinating how it works. Which is why you can't think your way into awareness. It takes you away from awareness.
So when you went through your 4 days of understanding, I think you called it, could you elaborate on that? Were you? It sounds much like the near-death experiences that we've heard, in which they go through a almost an all-knowing
Yes.
type of phase, and it's and time doesn't exist, and 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 it's fascinating. And then they come back with the information that they need. It's almost they like they see every answer to everything all at once. But it was almost be paradoxical to come back and have every answer to everything, but they come back with what they need. Did you feel that to some extent? Or how? What was
Yes,
it
it
like?
really was. Actually, now I've never really thought about it in
I'm
this way
sorry.
before, but it really was like a near-death experience. It was an identity death experience. And what that means is that for 4 days, Rebecca didn't exist. There was just life happening. So in essence, my sense of identity completely disappeared, and I was just watching a view, but there was no individual sense of self watching the view. So in that state, like a near-death experience, I suppose you have a very expanded view of life. Because when you're not looking just through the eyes of an individual with all your filters and memories and expectations and programs, you're just seeing life unfold, all as one consciousness. So that was the experience. And in the moment that it happened, I was looking out across the sea to some islands, and everything just came to life. And probably the closest thing I could describe to it was, do you remember those magic eye pictures that used to be around about 15, 20 years ago? You would look at a picture and then suddenly an image would pop out if you focus your eyes properly. It was a little bit like that. So before it happened, it was a flat image, which was how I always felt about it when I was a child. That everything was just flat. And then when I had this experience, everything just popped out and came to life. And it was just, everything was alive. The road was alive. The tree was alive. The ocean was alive. And it was all one living being. And I was also a part of that, this one living being. It was just extraordinary. It was an incredible depth of perception. So that was really beautiful. I had an interesting experience on the second day. I was walking down the road. We lived in a little village, and there was just like one strip there. And I was having a drink right on the side of the road, because that's where the little table was. Everything very close by. In Bali, it's a little spreading out, put it that way. And then someone on a motorbike came and crashed their bike right next to me on the road and died randomly, just fell off and died right next to me, like a meter away. And like, that would be very startling, right? I was in a complete sense of awe and wonder, just watching this one living being express itself. And that was a really interesting experience, because there was nothing that was perceived to be bad about that experience or shocking about that experience. It was just more of this expression of life. It was quite extraordinary. Well,
I do think, well, for anybody tuning in for the first time, they're probably a little shocked to hear
Yeah.
that. But I think that both of us can understand what you're saying. I think our view of death has changed dramatically as we've been meeting with people who have seen the other side and who really feel that, if anything, they're more alive on the other side. So I don't. I know that I don't think of death as anything sad anymore. Um, so
yeah. I would say it's a
yeah,
deepening
And
of
the fact,
perception. We get to see more.
yes, yeah. And the fact that you said everything was alive, that's what they always say when they are in heaven. Like everything's alive. The grass is alive. The flowers are alive.
Right.
Everything has life to it. That's another thing that they all say.
Exactly.
That it feels like you're all connected. You're all one. You're part of the
Mhm.
consciousness.
Right. And so to have that experience while you still have your physical form, I mean, isn't that what we talk about with heaven on earth? You know, it's actually having that experience of that awareness here within the earth reality. And that's what we talk about, you know, when we do our seminars and workshops. It's about expanding your perception and expanding your sense of life, because to be able to have that view while you're still in physical embodiment, I mean, that's heaven on earth. And that's how we create a new earth reality, is by deepening our perception. And then life is just a continual unfolding of wonder.
now seeing how everything has some sort of life to it, and seeing that we're all as one. When you came back, did you feel that you were more connected? Did you feel like you could tune in? I guess especially like with other people, because I think we all come across people that we feel like we have nothing in common with. We don't understand their viewpoints, their perspective, and I would like to be able to better understand people. Did you feel like you had the ability to better
That's such a
connect?
great question. I actually had an experience of great frustration once I came back to the real world, or when I returned to Australia about a year or so later. I was fine while I was staying there in Bali because I was able to just sit in that awareness. The challenge that I had when I went back to Australia was being around again people that knew me before, because they keep referring to your identity and how they remember you and how you are and what you like, and particularly when it comes to family. And what I discovered and was aware of very quickly is how easily we will go back into identity when it is continually referenced for us. So, of course, I realized in hindsight the gift of being away while that occurred, which is probably why so many people will go into retreat or monasteries, is because there's none of those continual references about your identity. So I actually found it quite challenging. And I found it challenging not only because I had to keep reminding myself, I am not that, I'm that but also because I had witnessed this incredible view of life. And I wanted so much to share that with people. And it was the greatest thing that I had ever experienced. And I was quite sure it was the greatest thing I would ever experience. And, you know, now this is many, many, many years later, and I would still say it's probably the greatest thing I've ever experienced. I've had a couple of experiences of it since, but not like that, because that was like my first, I would say, breakthrough moment. But it was so joyous to me. I wanted everybody to know about this, and I wanted everybody to be able to experience it, because did you know that this is how life really is, but we just can't see it? And if you just do this, you'll be able to see what's really here. And of course, you know, you can imagine how that went. I was in so much joy, and I wanted to share that joy with others, but no one could really understand what I was saying. And so again, It was that experience of you're not going to be able to reference this outside yourself. You're not going to be able to find other communities or spiritual groups that you can move to support what it is that you're experiencing. And again, I had to go within. What is this for myself? What does this mean for my life? How is it that I will develop my own style of living from this view? And of course, it was perfect. Because again, it's not something that you can really, it's not something you can ever give to anybody. And the only way you can really share it is just by being yourself in presence. And people might say that, there's something about you I'm interested, or what is it that you do, or what is it that you talk about, but you can't really give it to anyone. I wish I could.
I like that you said, well, you said that you went back and you just saw people and they kept referring to your identity, and that was kind of frustrating to you, which I found very interesting, because in the moment that you said that, I realized that I'm doing some traveling right now. I'm doing traveling by myself. And where years ago I wouldn't have wanted to do that. And a lot of people ask me, like, well, you're by yourself. Why are you by yourself? Like, aren't you lonely? And I'm like, I actually really love it. And I think partly I love it because I go places and there's no identity that I'm living up to. I'm just showing up and I'm being whoever I want to be in that moment.
Exactly. I love that you said that, because it's been the same experience for me with travel. And that experience going to Indonesia, I didn't know anyone. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a TV. I didn't have internet for a while until we got some, dodgy dial-up. There was nobody who knew me. I could be anyone. And of course, when you realize you can be anyone, you realize you don't really want to be anyone. And that was the gift. And that's the gift for me that travel keeps giving, is that you are free of having to maintain an identity. Yeah. So I love that you said that, Adrian. I think that's wonderful that you're discovering your freedom in that. Because that's when we get to sense how do I really feel about things? What do I really like and don't like? What is my personality really like?
Yeah, we're all on a continual journey. I love having these little realizations as we talk and as we interview different people. There's something to learn from everyone and from all these different experiences.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that little phrase that people say when they haven't seen you for a while. Oh, you've really changed.
You're like, you don't even know.
And then you think, well, have I really changed, or am I just becoming more, just becoming more of life, and less of identity. And it's funny how people can become quite disconcerted when they haven't got that reference point to kind of, I won't say grab you with, but people feel safe when they know where you are and what you're about. When they know which book you are on the library shelf and where to find you, and they've got the category and the section for you, and that's good. I feel safe now because I know exactly where you are and how to reference you. But people get very, very disconcerted when they don't know where to put you or where they can't find you. And that's what happens the more you lose your identity. And I'm sure many people that you would have interviewed for near-death experiences have had that experience where people don't really know what to do with them afterwards.
They come back in totally a different person, and sometimes they get divorced and leave their career and change their life totally. And sometimes the people that were in their life before can't accept the changes that they...
Right. Yeah. So then we ask the question, is an identity for our sense of self and safety, or are our identities actually to help other people feel safe? It's interesting, isn't it? Really interesting. Yeah.
We all have a tendency to categorize and put labels and form judgments. And if we let all that go, then it seems like we're closer to spirituality.
Right. Well, we're leaning back into the grandiosity of what we really are. Because, identities like, if we look at life as a great tree, cosmic tree with all its roots and branches, we experience ourselves as identity when we move right to the tip of one branch and we're looking outwards towards life. Where do I need to go? How do I need to grow? What do I need to strive for? And yet when we lean back into ourselves, we access the greatness of everything, which is really how channeling works, actually. Because channeling's not a bringing, well, in my experience, channeling's not a bringing something in, it's a leaning back and accessing more because we're all connected and we're all connected within.
So whenever you channel, do you have some spirits or saints that come to you and say, I want to say this message right now? Or do you have to call to them and say, can you tell me what messages you have for me right now?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't think anyone's asked me that in quite that way before. So it's nothing that's happening outside of myself. It's me relaxing back into what's available. So I do have a team of masters. Some people call them ascended masters that come through. And basically that's me getting relaxing away from my identity and leaning back. And if you imagine branches on a tree, I lean back far enough so that other personalities or expressions of life that are resonant with me and in a similar vibration I can express in that way. So yeah, so it's I guess I'm what you call a channeler on demand. Which means that it's a very easy thing for me to do. It's as people book sessions, or if we're doing a seminar or a workshop or retreat, whether there's a question or whether we just want to express something and then people ask questions about it. It's all very relaxed and flowing.
Do you ever get like someone who's passed away and someone's family trying to send messages through you to?
Yeah, I think when I first started channeling and I didn't have the awareness that I have now, because the experience we talked about, that oneness experience, happened about 5 years, more actually, about 6 or 7 years after I started channeling, and that shifted my view of channeling. So instead of, I'm an open radio receiver, what wants to come in, which is how I started, or my belief was how I started, this is now just to relax and breathe, and it all just flows. So it's far more comfortable, and it also gives me the greatest caliber of wisdom that's available. So before I had that awareness and I felt that I was an open radio receiver, yes, I did have experiences where people's loved ones would come through. And I have to say, I didn't find that to be a very comfortable experience. I know that there are mediums in this world who are wonderful at doing that, and they provide a great comfort and service to others. It's not for me. I found it to be quite an uncomfortable experience. And I could feel what that person felt when they passed away. And there was a lot of emotion and a lot of residue. And I didn't find that to be a lovely experience. I was happy to be there to be able to enable the people who were grieving to experience that, but I did not personally enjoy that experience because I embodied everything that they were feeling. And I remember doing one once where it was I'd been asked to come to do a house clearing, because I used to do house clearings when I was at university. And I came to do one, and the woman didn't tell me. She'd booked it months before I turned up. And I turned up, and the night before, her daughter had passed away in her bedroom. She had overdosed. And this woman,
the night before
I arrived. And so she decided, in her state of grief and shock, to keep the appointment and to have me still come and do it. And I did so because I felt so much compassion for the family. but I do not want to ever experience what it feels like to overdose on drugs again.
My goodness.
It has to take a lot out of you afterwards too. It probably takes a while for you to recover and get back to normal if you experience something like that.
I have so much respect and gratitude for mediums that are able to do that. And perhaps they do it in a way that's much more energy efficient and comfortable than the way that it happens for me. But that is not something that I wish to that I wish to do more of, put it that way. So I have my team of masters and occasional other streams of consciousness that come through, and I'm very happy with that.
And do you also see auras around people?
Yes,
or
yeah, since very young. So part of the work I used to do actually at a natural medical clinic was mapping people's energy fields and what was happening with them as they were moving through different shifts of awareness and treatments. Yeah, that's something that can be easily taught.
Oh, you can see ours through Zoom too, or
that would be
this
that would be something I would see internally rather than externally. So if you're here in person with me, I'll be looking at you from the external view. If you are not here in person, we would go within and have a view. That's how we do most of what we do, which is online. So we often think that we look outwards, but if we actually move our vision inwards, we have a much greater view of life, a much greater view. We can see so much more.
I find it very interesting that I'm doing this because my background has been with technology and even with artificial intelligence, which seems the exact opposite of this because it's very much looking outwards for the answers. It's very much using technology for the answers. Do you feel that we're moving into a world that's more challenging because of these distractions?
And this is something that the masters have actually spoken about recently is artificial intelligence, because a lot of people in the spiritual community are quite worried about artificial intelligence. And a lot of people think that it's a wonderful enhancement of our capacity to create. And our view about that, when I say when the masters come through, our view about that is that if we're going to see artificial intelligence as something separate to us, that we are trying to inform, or that it is trying to inform us, which is the fear that it's going to inform us, then that is a possible version of reality that we can create. However, artificial intelligence, in the view of the masters, is an opportunity for us to discover our true capacity, because it's an outward display of everything that we create and that we know. So if we start to see artificial intelligence as a projection of our own consciousness, that's the unified consciousness version. We're now seeing what we are capable of, then that's a shift and an evolution in human consciousness. Because that means that everything that we have going on within our collective field is now on display. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Knowledge is not hidden anymore. It's all out there. Look at what we have created. But the idea that artificial intelligence could be something separate to us, that could become something more intelligent or sentient than we are, that is a separation view. And as soon as you have a separation view, you're inviting opposition. Rather than artificial intelligence is an extension and a demonstration of what we as humans are capable of. And let us always remember where it begins. It begins here, and it gets expressed out this way. So that's how we have been speaking about it.
I like that explanation, because it is, if it wasn't for humans, if it wasn't for all of us, artificial intelligence wouldn't exist. It is essentially the collection of all of our knowledge. That being said, and with the elegant way that you described it, it can give the wrong answers. So I don't want anybody watching to think it sounds all knowing and I'm going to trust whatever I get back from artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is also built on fictional novels. It's built on everything that man has
Right.
created. So the answer you get back is not necessarily a fact, but it is part of what humans put out there. So
But
something to
you
keep in
make an
mind.
excellent point, because what you're saying is that a system is being created that can display an infinite number of potentials and possibilities. It's not about being correct or incorrect. And that's exactly the same as human creation. What we imagine, what we think about, what we say, what we perceive is not about being correct or incorrect. It's about all the different possibilities that can occur. It's the mind and duality's obsession with right or wrong, black or white, that would even lead us to demand artificial intelligence to be correct.
Exactly.
Isn't that interesting?
Very interesting.
My mind's blowing. Like, what? That is so cool. Like,
I love the way you described it, because I imagine a lot of people feel conflicted with the spiritual world and the fast moving, technically advanced world. But maybe we should just let go of thinking that things conflict, that anything conflicts, because it almost sounds like we were saying is there's harmony to everything. We just may not understand that.
Because we don't necessarily look for harmony, we look for opposition. The mind will always look for a problem to solve. It's an engineer, and it likes to reverse engineer things too. So if this has happened, how do we go back and figure out how this happened? It does everything retrospectively. But humans, in essence, are creative beings. We are consciousness. Consciousness creates. The divine creates. That's all of life. And so it's not real.
It's a very holistic, beautiful way to view the world.
This is depth of perception, because, on that surface 3D cardboard cutout view of life, everything is very, very oppositional. There's not a lot going on. So let's reduce everything to two. Let's reduce everything to duality, because that's the depth of perception that we have. And that's what this shift in consciousness is that people are often talking about, moving beyond 3D, moving into 5D or multidimensionality. That's that depth of perception where we're not just seeing black and white or opposition on the cardboard cutout. We're now seeing through that and into the interconnectivity and oneness of everything.
I would love you to elaborate more on that. We had someone recently mention that we are going to, at some point in the future, I forget how the person described it, but it was almost as if some of us will see, and I think he used the term 5D.
Yeah.
We will almost see everything that you talked about, and everything that the people that have experienced death and they've seen the other side, that they've talked about, that we will see that as we're living here on Earth, that some people will see that. I feel a bit confused by this concept, but can you elaborate on what you mean by 5D?
Well, it's a term we first started speaking about around 2008. And it was one of these things actually that started to come through the channelings, and I couldn't find any reference for it anywhere else. So thank goodness I just trusted what came through, because now it's quite a common concept, which I'm really delighted about. I wasn't sure that would happen in my lifetime. So really it is a depth of perception, just as we've been speaking about. So instead of seeing everything in terms of a linear construct, where it's, I've got to get from A to B, cause and effect, opposition, you have a deepening of your view. So you start to see that instead of limited options or possibilities, everything in duality is based on opportunity cost or sacrifice. So if I do that, I can't do that. If I take this fork in the road, I can't take that fork in the road. And once you have that depth of perception and you realize that everything is connected, suddenly there's all of these permutations and possibilities and pathways and doorways that you didn't know were there before, because you were only looking at two. So suddenly life begins to open up into more, artificial intelligence in some ways is a precursor to our acceptance of a deeper view, because it operates in a way that offers you depth of possibility. So it's almost preparing us to be able to view things in that way. So 5D really is a deepening of awareness so that you can now begin to see that you're not ever just limited to a choice between two things. And in this way, there's no longer a concept of I'm making progress or I'm regressing, but rather now I'm experiencing this, now I'm experiencing this, now I'm experiencing this, now I'm experiencing this. And more states of timelessness, more possibilities, and generally speaking, people's lives are going to appear less linear and less that you're on a particular journey and more that you're all over the map, because now you're able to experience more within a particular lifetime. And that's an evolution of consciousness. If we think about how consciousness has evolved over the past, even just a few hundred years, lifespans are increasing. Now, some people might say that's because of health. We would say it's because of an expansion of consciousness. And people are having more experience of life in each lifetime. So you may know, or even for yourself perhaps, that you have several different lives within one life. I was in this life, in this country, in this arrangement, and now I'm here, and now I'm here. And so that's an evolution of consciousness, and it's a depth of perception, because now you're not limited to a particular identity for the entire lifespan. You evolve beyond your identity without having a physical death. And that's an expansion of consciousness. So you can experience more as a human.
Do you think there's going to be a catalyst that gets us there to 5D? Some people mention a light.
Like event. A solar flash. I've heard that one.
Something,
yeah, we've actually spoken about that too. And we speak about it more in a metaphorical or symbolic sense. We do feel that there will actually be an event that draws people's attention and that is noticeable for most of the human population. But it's less about that external reference to the event. And it's more a signaling that people are aware about the inner light, because that external sun is a flash of awareness that everyone starts to awaken within, that light is within, that the divine is within, the wisdom is within, the sun is within. The whole experience of worshipping the sun, that's been such a tradition in human history, is acknowledging the sun that exists within us, which is their source essence. It's cosmic consciousness, it's God, it's divinity, it's whatever you want to call it. So that solar flash, which is being mentioned in many scriptures and many teachings over time, is the signaling of a return to source within for humans and the dawning of a new era of depth of perception.
So I want to see if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly. There may be a light event at some point. However, it won't be the light event that will cause the awakening, but it will be timed, I think, at a point where people will be ready for that awakening. But they need to be, I guess, in touch with themselves or in touch with spirituality to experience.
Well, it's happening now. It's happening now with what you're doing in your podcasts. You know, the interest is growing. People are more interested in what's the truth within here. So it's happening. And at a certain point, there's a collective agreement. And the collective agreement is, from what we have heard from the masters, it moves into a certain state. Some people might say critical mass. I don't really like that phrase. But there's a turning point where the awareness is there and it becomes collectively agreed upon. Now, if you look at certain moments in Earth's history, even more recently, where there is an event that occurs and suddenly everyone is looking at it. You know, 9/11, Diana passing away, There's all sorts of things that have happened that suddenly everyone's looking at it all at once. So when everyone's looking at it all at once, there's an agreed view. And it's being measured that there's a coherence in vibration that happens across the planet, and a vibrationary spike that gets measured because suddenly everyone's looking at everything at once. Now, you might say, well, it's because something terrible happened. That's not really the issue. It's about collective attention and collective focus. And when there is a collective focus, there is a collective agreement. And at that moment of collective agreement, there's a shift in consciousness. And so something like a solar flash is something that everybody is aware of, and that's a moment of evolution. And so that signals that time of awakening. That's how the masters have shared it.
That makes sense.
Yeah, like the eclipse. Everyone was looking at the eclipse.
Right. That was another shift of consciousness. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I felt it a few hours before it happened. There was this kind of anticipation or excitement, or something's going on. Yeah. So there was a quickening that was happening.
I guess it shows the ability that we all have to tune into the same consciousness.
Right. Right, because we're all branches of the same tree. And it's the shape of the universe. So here we are, and we're having a conversation, and we're branches of the same tree of life. So I greet you as extensions of myself. I'd be happy to come back another time and do a channeling for you.
Yeah.
Really love
And then you
that.
can speak to the masters directly and have your questions answered.
I can't wait. We're going to start making a list.
I know. Let's print it right now.
Yeah.
So if people want to know more about you, how should they find you and your information?
Oh, it's easy. It's my name, RebeccaDawson.com. And you'll find lots of interesting content there. We've got lots of videos of channel seminars and lots of interesting things for you to explore. And I have a YouTube channel as well, which you can also find through that website.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's been so interesting. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I was just compelled to talk to you because I knew that we could grasp more and more concepts out of just talking to you.
And just so you're aware, so Katie's most of her work is on the front end. She finds people who will be valuable to talk to and have very insightful things to share. And then most of my work is on the end where I do the editing. And so I purposely, and also, well, in addition, I purposely do not watch the videos of the people that we're interviewing because I want to have an element of surprise.
I like that.
I've brought up a few of my concerns and things I felt conflicted about. And the way that you explained things just makes so much sense to me. And it feels that things do have order, things do have harmony. And I'm really grateful that Katie found you and brought you onto our show.
Thank you. I feel very blessed to be here, and I love your approach. You and I have the same approach. I never read or research anything. I just show up. See what happens.
Yeah, I'm always trying to give him hints about things, and he's like, save it.
But it's very funny because sometimes people say to me, "Oh, I saw you do this, I saw you do that. How did you manage to speak to that person or do that?" And I'm like, I don't even know who they are. I just turn up and see what happens.
You just say yes.
Yeah. Yes, and what a wonderful team you both make. I have no doubt you'll continue to expand and introduce more views and possibilities to people.
Thank you.
We're learning so much along this journey, and the more we learn, the more we get excited about sharing stories like yours and profound insights that you bring.
Well, it's the best reason to do it. That's why I do what I do, because it's interesting to me and I learn so much. Otherwise, I'd just go and do something else. But nothing else is interesting enough. So,
I agree. This is the most interesting topic. Compelled to learn more.
And it's so nice to know that we are all connected. We are all part of the same consciousness. And I would like to believe that we are all part of the greater good, even though we don't always see it in one another, that there is some good there. It's just difficult and challenging to see sometimes.
And again, when we deepen our perception, we see that everything is connected and there isn't really good or bad. It's all just life unfolding as it is. And it's the wonder and miracle of life.
Yeah, and there's so much division in the world right now. It's really more important for us to remember that we are all just part of the same.
I mean, we can play in the ripples on the surface of the ocean where all the action is, or we can sink deeper into the embrace of the all. It's much quieter there, and you can still have a great view of what's happening, but it just looks magical, not life-threatening. Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you for having me today. It's been a delight to be with you.
Thank you.
You know.
Take care,
Thanks.
Rebecca.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.